Hi guys, welcome to this week's Top Catch Top Tip. Now this week we're going to look at the live baiting techniques we used on this week's episode when we went out and targeted kingfish on the Coromandel Peninsula. Now the first rig we used was a very standard live bait rig. It consisted of a 9-bar VMC hook tied onto an 80 to 120 pound O'Shea fluorocarbon leader using a simple uni knot. I had about a metre of leader. I then tied that onto a nice heavy duty ball swivel, and above that on the wind-on leader I slid on a 10-ounce ball sinker. Now the reason I used this rig was because I'd identified kingfish on my Garmin electronics. I knew what depth they were in, and I wanted to quickly and efficiently drop a live bait down to the desired depth and still have a live bait on the other end swimming along on this leader looking happy and natural and being much more appealing to a kingfish. And there's a couple of things you can do when you're dealing with live baits that'll ensure that they live as long as possible. The first thing is, when you're catching them in the morning on your sabikis, is to try and avoid touching them at all costs. The way I do that is when I catch a fish on my sabiki, I bring the sabiki rig out of the water, I grab the little sinker at the bottom, I bring it over to the top of my live bait tank, I then slide a bait knife down onto the little sabiki hook, I roll it out of the corner of the fish's mouth, and I drop the live bait straight into the live bait tank without touching it. Then when it comes time to use the live bait, I use a live bait net. Trust me, go out and buy one of these. You can find them online, they're very cheap, and it means that when it's time to get your live bait out of the live bait tank, you don't have to try and chase a crazy one around. You just scoop that in, you'll catch it, you won't damage the fish, and you can get it on the hook quickly and efficiently without hurting the fish, and it'll be much more lifelike in the water. Once you've got your fish in your little live bait net, you want to put it in a wet towel and firmly hold the fish without damaging it. It'll keep it much calmer, and you'll find it a lot easier to put the hook in. Now for this demonstration I'm using some old live baits out of my bait freezer. I didn't want to use live ones because we're not fishing today. I didn't want to sacrifice perfectly good live baits just for a demonstration, and these ones also tend to behave a little better for the camera. Now when you're using this standard live bait rig that we've already discussed, there's two ways that I like to hook the fish on. By far and away, my most preferred way is to use the little holes in the jack mackerel's nose. I just pass the hook through those holes in front of the eyes. They pass through nicely, and you'll find that your live bait hook will sit there nice and firmly. It doesn't disturb the fish too much, and if it does swing around, there's not too much of the fish for the barb and tip of the hook to get hung up on. Now, if you're using a slightly bigger live bait, like a small kahawai, an extra oversized jack mackerel, or a big blue koharu, you might find that that nose area is a bit thick to get that live bait hook through. In those circumstances, I take the live bait hook and I pass it through the top of the fish, just in front of the dorsal fin and above the backbone. You want to be really careful not to hit the fish's backbone. You'll kill the fish instantly and it'll be no good as a live bait. The main thing to do when you're doing this is to ensure that the tip of your hook is angling slightly forward. You pass it through the top of the fish, roll it out, and you'll drop that in. You'll find that that won't bother the fish too much. Kingfish always eat their baits head first. You'll find that that'll have a really good hookup rate. The kingfish will swallow that jack mackerel into its big gob. You'll pull that live bait hook free of the bait, and as it rolls out, it'll roll perfectly into the corner of the kingfish's mouth. That's why we use circle hooks, and you'll have a fight on your hands. Now the other technique we used this week was the slow trolling of a live bait. Now that's really effective when the kingfish are higher up in the water column. You want to cover a bit more area, and I use almost an identical rig. I take a 9-bar hook, I tie it on about a metre of leader, and occasionally I'll slide a small 4-ounce ball sinker that'll slide up against the fish's nose if I want to drop it a little deeper. I very rarely use that because I find that it'll get tangled up it'll get tangled around the fish. Sometimes your leader will wrap around it. To avoid that, I'll take a little toothpick, I'll stuff that into the hole on the sinker, I'll snap it off, and then it'll keep the ball sinker firm. I only ever use that when I'm trying to cover some ground and the kingfish aren't taking the live baits on the surface. It tends to be much more effective when you can just keep that whole rig nice and free without the sinker on there. Now, when we're attaching fish to trawl, the only way I hook them up is to take the live bait hook, put it into the fish's mouth, and roll the hook out of the top of the fish's roof of its mouth. You got to be very careful not to pinch the whole mouth shut, because you'll stop the fish breathing, and that way your fish will get pulled along nicely. It'll look very natural, and when your kingfish comes up and grabs the fish by the head, again you'll roll that hook out of the live bait into the corner of the kingfish's mouth, and again you'll have a very big fight on your hands. Now, my favourite reel for live baiting is by far and away the Telica 25. It's got heaps of drag, heaps of stopping power, really good line capacity, and when paired on this Shimano Abyss 30 to 50 game rod, it is, in my mind, the ultimate live baiting setup for kingfish, marlin, any type of big game fish that you'll be targeting in New Zealand waters. Now, once I've dropped my live bait down to the desired depth that I've identified on my Garmin electronics, I gently ease up the drag just enough until the line stops coming off the reel, and I'll monitor the live bait. You'll feel it kicking away down there. Hopefully, if it's in front of a kingfish, you'll feel it start to get really agitated. At that point, I back the drag all the way off, and I stop the line running off by pinching my forefinger and my thumb onto the line. Once I feel the weight come onto the live bait, I let it all go, and I just stop any overwind by putting a little bit of gentle thumb pressure on the spool. I give the kingfish plenty of time to eat the live bait. Once I feel the line speed speeding up, and I'm pretty confident that that kingfish has taken the live bait into its mouth, I'll gently ease up on the drag right up to strike, and I'll gently lift up my rod tip, taking the hook out of the live bait, rolling it up into the corner of the kingfish's mouth, and at that point you're on your own. Hold on, wind hard, try and turn that kingfish, and get ready for the fight of your life. When I'm trolling a live bait, I also like to use this Telica 25. Again, I'll be ticking along at a very slow speed, 1 to 2 knots is ideal. The Minn Kota electric trolling motor is perfect for that. If you have one of those, you're going to be loving trawling live baits around. I'll drift the live bait out the back, and again, I'll just tick the drag up till it stops the line coming off the reel. As soon as you get a strike, that line starts coming off the reel, I'll back the drag right off, I'll pick the rod up, and I'll monitor the live bait to see how it's feeling. Once I feel that line rip off, again, I'll just ease the drag up and roll the hook up into the corner of the kingfish's mouth. Now, if you're using a spin setup, they can also be very effective for live baiting. The contraption I've found at my local Top Catch store that makes fishing with spin reels with live baits absolutely fantastic is this little live bait release clip. It attaches to the foregrip of your rod. You can drop your live bait down, slide your line up into that clip, have your bail arm open, and when you get a bite, the line will release from that clip. You'll see your line coming off your reel. You flick your bail arm over, tighten up your drag, and again, don't strike. Gently raise the rod tip and roll that circle hook into the corner of the kingfisher's mouth. When you're using spin gear, you want to have your drag backed right off so that when you drop the bail arm over, the drag will start pulling off pretty easily, and then you can tighten up the drag on top of the spool there. There's a lot more moving parts when you're using spin gear. It can be a little more difficult to use, but if you're using a reel like this, the Stella 20,000, you can stop just about any fish in the sea. But if I had to pick my favorite, I'd definitely choose the Shimano Telica 25. All this equipment, the hooks, the leader, The Shimano rod and reel combos are all available in your local Top Catch store, and I hope to see you guys on the water soon, targeting hard fighting New Zealand kingfish with your fresh live baits. Yee!